I'm Sampstra Games. This video is sponsored by Slytherin and I'm going to tell you all about why you should play as the African nations. So there's a variety of new African nations and they play a little bit differently. Firstly, you have the sort of West African nations, so like Gao, Ghana, and etc. What makes these really exciting is that you have this late African culture modifier, which gives you a really nice bonus to trade acumen and trade range. This plays together quite well with one of the new features of the Resistance Wrap, which is the Great Trade Campaigns. I have another tutorial if you want to know how that works exactly, but we'll talk about how it works with the African nations in detail soon. And then you have these East African nations, and they are a little bit different. They mostly get the Ethiopian culture or the Nubian culture. So here with the Nubian culture, you're basically getting a bonus to treaties and productivity in agriculture. And here with the Ethiopian culture, you can get improved army logistic, better legacy, and a better chance of newborns. So this is a difficulty related here to the East African nations. If you're going to be playing as things like Zagwe or Solomon or a Kingdom of Alodia, all of you are basically Christians, but what you're going to be surrounded with are Muslims. So you have the Fatimids up here, you have Oman, you're going to have the Kanembu Fractious Empire, and if they spread out, then they're going to go at you. And so the problem here is that obviously they can declare a jihad on you, but also if you conquer some of their territory, you're going to have to deal with religious conversions, and they're all pretty big. Like Fatimids are really strong. Kanembu, if they spread out in your direction, can be really strong. So it's not going to be easy to deal with these strong neighbors if you're going to be playing on this side. So just keep that in mind. Now, if you're playing as one of the East African nations, another thing you might deal with is the demesne. Now, this has been made a little bit easier in the July update, but it's still a challenge, I would say. So, for example, I'm playing here as the Zagwean Dynasty, and my maximum demesne size for 30 game is just 6. That's very low. Now the way this works steady, if you go overboard, you're not going to have as much of a penalty as before, but there's still going to be a penalty and you have to deal with low authority, which can cause you to regress. But even if you don't regress immediately, the problem is that in order to obviously progress to better kingdom size, you need to have a lot of progress tokens. So you need to keep your authority up, which is obviously difficult because if you want to expand, you're going to be losing it due to your demesne size. This leads me to another problem that is common for both the East and the West African nations, and this is infrastructure. So for example, you might encounter a region like this one where actually I have a negative infrastructure. Now I can obviously move my people here and get some positive infrastructure, but it still takes me a really long time. For example, to build this brickworks, which would give me better infrastructure, it would take 24 turns. This is a huge disadvantage because some of your enemies, especially those that are maybe up here near Spain, they have bigger populations and they're obviously able to build much, much faster. Is there anything you can do about this? Well, yes, you can. If you can control at least half of a province, you can then combine all the infrastructure in the entire province, or at least half of the province if you control that, and focus on building the infrastructure building first, and then that will make everything faster. In the West African nations, it's really beneficial to focus on trade because you have the good trade range and trade acumen, which means that if you place a trader, you're almost certainly going to be able to find someone, yourself or somebody else to trade with, or, and that's even better, if you place a merchant, it's very likely that within the 5 trade range, which we have here, for example, we might be able to find somebody who can provide us that good, and because of the high trade acumen, they will trade it with you. Even if they need it, they will give it to you, which is great because you can get a lot of money this way. There is a lot of impediments that you can use to be able to build a lot of traders. There are even some regions where you can have up to 5 different traders, which is huge. So you definitely want to utilize it, especially because the traders are zero cost building. The only caveat here is, in relating to the previous problem, which was the infrastructure, what could happen is that in regions like this, like Edu, for example, if you wanted to place, let's say, a silk trader, it would take you 10 turns to build it, which is a relatively long time if you don't have much else in this region. And even though the trader building is it doesn't take a slot, it can give you money. So if you're playing in other nations, it's basically a no-brainer. You should always build it. But here, you're taking 10 turns. And in those 10 turns, you obviously can't build anything else here. And during that same time, there are stronger enemies, like maybe ones up here, right, that have much more people and better infrastructure. They can build a variety of different buildings that can help them with, you know, like getting better military expertise or more food or infrastructure and etc. So basically, you might like be falling behind if you have too much time building these traders. So if you have a region with low infrastructure, and it's especially if it's not part of a province, you might want to think about, like, is it better to build this trader building, or is it better to build something else first, and then once the region is like sufficiently good, like it gives you a lot of good resources, maybe then you want to build traders and etc. So there's a variety of new buildings when it comes to the African nation. So first, you have a variety of gatherers. So you can have like fruit gatherers here, which is a way to gain food. We can have exotic fruit gatherers, which also give you food, but what makes it interesting is that this can give you a nationwide health bonus, 1% chance for fruit. We also have things like material gatherers, which basically a way to gain infrastructure. Another interesting new buildings are nuts gatherers, a wagon maker, foragers, hunting party. Now another really cool building is a warrior contest. This gives you a pretty nice legacy increase, and it gives you the bonus authority event, and it gives you a chance to gain a bodyguard, which I think is pretty handy. And then we have the rock-hewn large church. So this can give you legacy increase, authority increase, lots of piety. Another interesting set of zero slot buildings are rituals. So rituals have been in the game before, but no one was able to build them. So now, as a part of these tribal nations, you can actually build them yourself. So you have, for example, a dancing ritual, which gives you a chance to gain legacy, or you can gain initiation ritual, which gives you piety, manpower, legacy. There's a burial ritual, which is available for all sorts of nations. And now there's one thing we haven't mentioned, and that's camels. Who doesn't want to play with camels? They're amazing. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this video. Bye bye!